Thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about Jellyfish's 2026 State of Engineering Management Report. It's our annual survey that looks at a pretty broad set of questions around engineering management. In particular, at this point, a lot of looking at AI practice and adoption. So we'll dig into the results that we're seeing today. Just by way of introduction, I'm Adam Ferrari. Good to be with you all. I lead our engineering team today, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Neeraj Deshmukh from Blitzy. Neeraj, maybe you could say a few words about yourself and Blitzy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today, Adam. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to our webinar today. Like Adam said, I'm a senior member of technical staff at Blitzy. Blitzy is an enterprise-scale agentic autonomous software development platform. That's a lot of buzzwords in there. But what we do effectively is build enterprise software at scale. And we do it based on fully understanding your entire repo, reverse engineering it, and then creating spec-driven plans and test-driven workflows that employ an army of agents, so like thousands of agents working autonomously in parallel that can plan, implement, and validate complete large-scale software development projects. And by doing this at scale, we managed to compress the time frame needed for these projects from months or years to weeks and days. So that's who we are, and we'll talk a little bit more about how Blitzy fits into kind of this overall AI-based engineering transformation as we go along in this webinar.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just I can say, having seen a demo of Blitzy, it's a really, really cool product. So if definitely worth checking out. Also, congratulations. You guys had a big funding event just a couple of weeks back. That was pretty impressive. I know I'm in the Boston area. It's really cool to see a Boston AI tech.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, interesting
we are
very, very cool
very
stuff.
happy. It's also a huge amount of responsibility now. We have to live up to the billing, and so the work has just begun, and we are excited. There's a lot of new cool stuff coming down the pike, and we are super excited to see how that goes.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. All right, so to jump in, like I said, we're going to talk about our State of Engineering Management Report. We survey over 600 engineering leaders, and we look at a pretty wide range of questions in engineering leadership and AI in particular. We'll talk about some of the key findings. We'll look at the AI topic in particular, some of the trends we're seeing there, and a couple of insights we pull out just around the general engineering outlook, state of software engineering. It's a really interesting topic that's in a lot of transition. And then we'll leave time at the end, like I said, for Q&A. So we'll jump right in. This year's report, super interesting. One of the things I'll note is the survey was conducted in January, such an interesting moment in the industry, because if you think about the timeline there, these new models, Opus 4.5, ChatGPT 5.1 dropping right before the holidays. Then we all went away for the holidays, and it felt like almost everybody, with their hands in engineering were playing with the new models and kind of had a turning point, I think, over the holidays. And coming into this year, it's been like a new world almost, like we're in a new phase of the evolution of AI. And I think just to start off with that backdrop, one of the things we saw loud and clear in the survey results was pretty solid progress in terms of, these are respondents reporting, what they believe they're achieving, but it's really strong. 6 in 10 saying they're getting at least a 25% increase in productivity using AI. This is impressive. Last year, I think we were starting to see the nibbles of that, but I think it was a little bit less strong and broad-based, but pretty impressive results. I'm sure, Neeraj, with Blitzy, with your customers, you're seeing similar, if not more even.
Absolutely. I think the big difference is, like, we are no longer looking at AI as a tool that makes individual engineers faster. I think the people who are really seeing these major velocity gains, they are doing things in terms of how they work. Like, they have changed the workflows, they have changed their methodology. They're not looking at basically AI tools as simply an autocomplete assistant. They're looking at it as an accelerator for their sprints.
Yes.
And so it's like providing more context, right? Getting more orchestration and building in additional validation and all of these that you can kind of do
Yeah.
predictably, like build in quality, build in tests, like so not just speed, but like code that you can actually trust, right? And I think that's the most important kind of distinction between like how people used AI maybe like a year ago or a year and a half ago to where they are at now. And the amount of rework that you can minimize, I think that's the big differentiator between the people who are reporting kind of large amounts of gain, whereas people are who are simply kind of dabbling in AI and all they're creating is, for the lack of a better word, AI slop, and then have to kind of spend cycles, additional work, kind of cleaning it up, right? And so we've
Yeah.
seen kind of both extremes of these stories in the media, and there is a certain element of truth there. I think people who are kind of more intentional about using AI, they are seeing the value, whereas people who are kind of simply kind of dipping their toes without
Yeah.
like a plan, they are not.
Yeah. It's a perfect transition. And we've got some interesting data, by the way, that it'll be interesting to see your reaction to that like looks at that more closely, the breakdown of the sort of change in use of AI across the SDLC. But to your point about like dabbling versus really adoption, deeper adoption, 100% seeing that, the adopters are pulling. We've got some more detailed results on this that I'll show in a little bit, but just generally, the outsized improvements to productivity, but also job satisfaction and efficiency. We're seeing that with deeper adoption. And it's exactly what you say. It's not just like how many tasks do you use it for, but it's the sort of the breadth of adoption. Are you using it for a fuller workflow? Are you advancing your practice to more end-to-end development, with a thoughtful feedback and testing, et cetera, built into the process? That's where some of the outsized gains are really happening. So, it's one of these cases where I think we appreciated or going in that you needed adoption. If you didn't use the tools, you weren't get the benefit. But I think like what you said is exactly right. It's not just the coding task. It's more of a full integration into the SDLC. That's where the real unlock comes.
Right. And I think, I mean, the people who are kind of reporting like this very high job satisfaction, they are the ones who are escaping the kind of low value work, right? Like they are kind of leaving the grunt work, the keeping the lights on stuff
Yeah.
to AI, reducing the cognitive load on themselves through whatever these kind of repetitive implementation, validation steps that they had to do before, and focusing more on the judgment heavy work, right? The
Yeah.
stuff where they actually have to bring in their engineering skills, their kind of problem solving skills. That's where the fun is, right? Writing,
Yeah.
like simply writing syntax or fixing bugs is not the fun part, right? Solving problems is. And I think what's happening today is now AI is finally freeing people to focus on the stuff that matters. Uh, but again, you have to kind of do this intentionally, like I was saying, like remove the bottlenecks, standardize the workflows. Like you can't simply rely on individual heroics, right? Like one
Yeah.
developer getting super value out of an AI system is not going to lift the entire enterprise up.
Right.
And,
Right.
and so when we talk about kind of overall morale in the team, I think the entire team has to feel the benefit of that AI adoption. And that only comes through changing the SDLC to not just be kind of AI assisted, but actually be AI enabled. And
Yeah.
the way you do that, like again, like provide more context. Like if the AI system understands your entire code context, it can provide you with kind of more valuable insights, more valuable solutions, uh, and having like planning built into your work. That again, like you can use AI to do that, and that's built on top of this system understanding, and then implementing solutions at scale using an army of AI agents. All of
Yeah.
those things basically free you up to focus more on deciding what that target state looks like. Like, what do you want the solution to look like rather than how you go from point A to point B
Yeah.
and navigate all the potholes along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I know one thing we often get asked about adoption is what's happening in the tool space. It felt like last year it was a year of experimentation and there was a lot of churn, constant, like people trying out new tools and new tools emerging. I think this year we're seeing a little bit more stability and also, I mean, I think unsurprisingly, a big burst for Claude Code. Interestingly, like, as a SaaS, we have, I think, one of the biggest data sets of SDLC data in the industry. We see a little bit different results, but in either case, we see Claude, I think leading the pack. And I think that part of what the story is there is the tools and skills and the fact that people are looking towards best practices and there's becoming more of a shared best practice. Like people are less interested in fiddling with different tools, more interested in getting down to work and what's the productive workflow and integrations that you use to make that really work well. So I mean that's what we're seeing in the tool space. I know you fit into ecosystems at your customers. Do you see similar?
Somewhat. I think what we are seeing now is like people are more interested in systems that can reason rather
Mm,
than systems that can simply suggest,
yeah,
right? And I mean, yes, tool loyalty counts to some extent, but if people are not getting the results that they desire, people are kind of quick to experiment. They're willing to move from one model to another. But that also comes at a cost because like as you change models, and even within the same tool, as you get like a new release of a model, you have to kind of train yourself to be able to work with that new model. The prompting is slightly different. The kind of experience, the interaction is a little different. And so each time something like this happens, you have to train yourself to adjust. And now you scale that up at enterprise scale, and this becomes a big problem because like if I have 1,000 people engineering team, like not everyone is going to manage this effectively. And
yeah,
so one of the things that we do at Blitzy is we have kind of taken away the entire burden of dealing with the LLMs directly from the customer, right?
yeah,
The engineers that work with Blitzy, they are prompting to Blitzy, and that doesn't change at all because we are not really asking them to tell us in AI terms what they want. We are asking them to define what their end goals are in kind of pure engineering terms. Like, this is what my system looks like today. This is what I want my system to look like after the implementation is done. And Blitzy uses a combination of all of the leading frontier models like Anthropic, Google, OpenAI. And so our agents algorithmically pick the best model for a particular task. And so we have all of these models active at the same time within
mm,
our agentic infrastructure. And so customers get the best of all worlds by
yeah.
using that.
Yeah. It's incredibly powerful. It's really wild. Yeah. I think probably the last sort of high level, I think, finding from the report, not super surprising, but boy, did we see a spike this year in focus on measuring engineering productivity. I think it's not surprising. There's been so much, like the adoption was such a skyrocketing, measure last year, and people are spending a lot on on this. And in fact, right, they're encouraging sort of token maxing. How much can you spend? Just in the spirit of figuring out what's possible.
Right.
But I think it's starting to beg the question of like, okay, like, is it working? What are we getting for this? We're past that initial experimentation phase when you were just happy to see activity, right? You're like, let's get going. Now you're like, hey, is it working? Also, are you on the continuous improvement journey? If you can't measure where you are, then like, is the next tool or model or practice really actually moving the needle? You got to know this. So we got very strong response in terms of interest in measuring productivity. Interestingly, I think the read is something roughly like 40% of orgs are actually measuring. So there's a big gap between perceived importance and actually whether people are executing on this. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. There was, I think, good progress in proposals on measurement frameworks last year. We put out some, I think, good stuff on that, but it's still not necessarily established what's the best practice, and there's a lot of, I think, question in terms of how this is going to, sort out in the end. Do you hit that with your customers? Are they like,
Oh,
okay,
absolutely. Like, I
yeah,
mean, we work with some of the biggest companies in the world, like Fortune 100, Fortune 500, Global 2000. And the shift that we see everywhere is the executives, the C-suite, they're not looking at can you produce more code faster? They're
yeah,
looking at how much more correct code are you shipping in a predictable fashion?
yeah,
Right. And that's the big shift, right? People are kind of going from like, okay, simply, can you do this faster? Can you do better? Can you do more? to like, how can I measure this? What's the impact? What's the ROI? Because I'm spending so much as an executive on this AI adoption. People are maxing out their kind of AI budget, token budget, like in months, like we've seen in the news stories. And so the gap that you talk about, like where 84% are talking about like productivity is like super important to them, but barely 45, 46% of them are actually measuring it. That's huge, right? And again, like the token maxing, prompt volume, seed counts, those are not really indicators of like, are you truly productive with using AI? What
Yeah.
you want is to look at like, what's your cycle time? Like, how many PRs are you putting through? Uh, what's your review latency? Like,
Yeah.
how many defects are you seeing? Like, are the trends moving up, moving down with the AI generated code?
Yeah.
Uh, how many like issues are you causing or like vulnerabilities you're introducing in AI generated code? Like, what's your roadmap look like? Has your roadmap changed? Like, is it faster? Is it slower? Is it bigger? Right. And I think those are the things that we need to measure now for the impact of the adoption. It's not just like how many people have access or how many people are using AI, because access, I think, is universal now. Like, I think there is no company who can't easily subscribe to one of the AI models and start using it pretty quickly. It's what are you doing with it, and can you
Yeah.
measure what you're doing with it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually it's a great transition. Diving this now, this section will dive a little bit deep in engineering's AI era. Like what were the specific findings and more detailed analysis we did on sort of AI adoption and impact. The first one, it goes to a couple of comments that you've made, including like getting the impact being about the full SDLC. We actually asked like how are people actually changing their SDLC? Where are they using AI? And I think this year we saw I mean, it's very reflected in the results, the fact that you're seeing this be much broader than just code writing. Because of course, like if the cost of code trends towards zero, the bottleneck has to move elsewhere. And I think the answer is, what can you do? You can only throw so many humans at that. Like it has to be to if put automation and AI in those other steps. And I think we're seeing that play out in real time from, I mean, code review was, I think you see the strong results here because that was very early. People appreciated how effective it was to have an LLM reviewer for your code,
Mhm.
but also planning this. I think this has been the year of planning, of like having AI
Absolutely.
help you write the spec, having AI do the test breakdown. And then also testing. I mean, testing and documentation. Documentation to me is so amazing because it's like the context feedback loop. It's like if I distill this down, and then testing is like it answers the question of how do I like, I think you do for critical stuff, you still need, I think, human eyes on parts of your code. But like for some stuff, it's like if you can be explicit and articulate about your acceptance criteria and force, sort of a test-driven development type approach, like that's how you get more flow. So I think it's been an interesting year of people appreciating the whole SDLC is the issue. And the funny thing is, I think that we're going to continue to see this shift as you optimize one thing, right? The bottleneck moves, and I think it's going to continue to move. I know you guys have this is a lot of inside your product. This is I think a lot of
Yeah,
what the
actually,
product
so
does is it's meant to beat this down, basically.
right. We've kind of taken a holistic approach to this because we kind of treat the entire SDLC as a single entity, single unit that we want to optimize as a whole.
Yeah,
Because otherwise, like you see, like a lot of these kind of vertical silos effectively within that SDLC process, from like getting product requirements to kind of having engineering acceptance and then transforming that into your epics or features and then breaking those down into sprints and then actually executing those and then kind of going through the testing and all of that, right? I mean, and so, but if you could kind of condense all of this into a single workflow, all of that underpinned by complete understanding of your code, right? So now your product requirements are also advised by the current state of the technology, which means that the friction that you had with your engineering teams about accepting those is gone, right?
yeah,
And now you kind of say, okay, well, I don't need to break this down into smaller pieces because I can implement epics at a time. So now you have kind of condensed your implementation time by a huge amount. And then you're building in all of the planning, all of the refactoring, all of the testing and validation as part of the code generation. This is what Blitzy does, right?
yeah,
So now what you're getting out is actually a PR that is like production ready
yeah.
because you folded in your validation right into the process.
Yeah.
So not only did you kind of reduce your implementation time, but you also completely transformed the life cycle of your kind of product development from the requirements generation all the way to deployment.
I'm curious actually. I've seen an interesting trend in this zone you're talking about, where I feel like there's two camps. There's a camp that's not what you're talking about, where it's kind of the code is the system of record of the system, right? Like always refer back to the code. Like there was actually a really nice video I saw from the head of development for Claude Code, and that's how they work. Everything's in reference to the code. Don't make secondary documentation. I think there's a whole other camp that's kind of where you're going, which is the spec is the artifact, the inputs are the artifact for management and revision and review and stuff like that. Is that a fair kind of assessment? I see some teams that are working in this way where they're like, we don't even want humans to look at the code. We want the spec to be the artifact where we put our rigor. And it almost makes you wonder, like, will pull requests go away because if you're not managing code, you're managing specs?
No,
Like,
I think people want to be involved and people want to be
mm,
in control, right? And one of the things that we do at Blitzy is to make sure that everything that happens, we have a human in the lead. So at every critical checkpoint, there is a human who has to explicitly approve the subsequent action, and therefore they have the kind of opportunity to review what the system has planned
yeah,
and give their okay. And all the way to the end where we are generating the PRs, and a human has to kind of review that and say, this is good before we can merge it. So there is no kind of automatic action
mm,
which can be potentially destructive.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So we are not going to accidentally like delete somebody's production database, right?
yeah,
So those are the kind of things that we have made sure we are built into, because like a lot of the, like especially in the enterprise world where compliance and security are paramount, auditability is paramount. You have to make
yeah,
sure that you provide evidence for everything that is happening. And so that observability is built into the platform. So I don't think that it's like just the code or just the spec. I think the system as a whole needs to have that audit trail, and it needs to have that kind of observability for anybody to come in and say, I know exactly what happened here, going from state A to state B, and I can figure out if there is an issue where that happened.
yeah. Makes sense. I mean, you guys serve enterprise customers, so I think it has to be that kind of like auditable and human
Yeah,
in
there is no alternative. And again, I mean,
yeah.
like even for individual developers or like smaller projects, like non-enterprise customers, I think it's just good practice.
Mm, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So this is we talked a little bit about adoption, but I really like this view. This really brings it home about the difference between what like the dabbling versus taking it seriously and making it an imperative for the team. And I think like my perception is you get a drafting effect when you get high adoption. You start getting a network effect of value from better practices. People find like the skills framework that works in your environment. They share it, they share ways of working, they they draft off one another. You also, frankly, there's a bit of a recruitment to me element of it. There's still, let's face it, there's still some fraction of engineers that are kind of like hesitant about AI, aren't sure it's a good thing, aren't sure it can really deliver. The more success stories you get in an organization, it becomes viral. If a respected engineer is trying this stuff out in earnest and getting good results, that speaks volumes more than us, on a webinar, like, chattering about this stuff. But for the engineer, they'll believe what they can, see on the ground there. So we see that, right? Like everything from productivity, job satisfaction, team efficiency, and like what's your growth outlook, they are all much higher for the teams that are reporting at commensurate high adoption of AI. I imagine your customers are probably like on in that zone, like inherently they're visionary enough to be going with a Blitzy. They're probably what you would consider sort of AI leaders.
Absolutely. So I think, but you have a point, because oftentimes, like we get the executive buy-in fairly quickly, but then when we start working with the engineering team, there is a natural amount of skepticism slash suspicion built in, because they look at Blitzy as yet another AI tool effectively, right? And
Mm.
one thing that engineers absolutely hate, myself included, is any tool that creates extra work for me, right? I don't
Yeah.
want to spend time on on cleaning up after a tool that I'm using, right? I
Yes.
want the
Yeah.
tool to help me, not create more work. And I think once engineers understand that it an AI-based system uh, that provides them architectural control as opposed to kind of creating grunt work for them, they are going to be much more excited and much more accepting of it than a tool that they suspect is just going to create additional burden on them.
Yeah.
So this is something that we see time and again. Like when we start working with the engineering teams, like we actually have like forward deployed engineers, solution consultants who like work hand in hand with them to onboard them to the platform, to kind of explain to them how things work, like go through some kind of simple projects with them to kind of build that familiarity and trust. And once they see how this is actually giving them that grounding in terms of like providing the full repo context. The plans are deterministic. They have the final say in terms of like specifying what problems to solve and approving the solutions that Blitzy has come up with, like the plan that Blitzy has come up with to implement, and then the actual code that we have generated. And that
Yeah.
testing and validation is actually built into it even before the code is presented for review. Uh, then we see that 180 degrees turn where they're like, wow, this is what I wanted. This stuff really works. Like this is not
Yeah.
creating work for me. This is actually freeing me to do like planning work to
Yeah.
figure out the roadmap.
Yeah. Actually winning on the merits. It's a good
Right,
place to
right,
be.
absolutely. And I think like when you have like usage that is standardized across teams, you see the returns compound as
Yeah.
opposed to when you have like individual experimentation that doesn't really scale.
Right. 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 This is the other, I wanted to put, I think this is the sort of a natural companion. You mentioned this a little bit before about AI taking on some of this is like right in the zone of what you're talking about, like AI taking some of the toil out so you can focus on the good stuff. And it was actually really cool that we saw this very literally in the results. It's like the outlook for the high adopters in terms of how much they're going to get to spend on innovation, roadmap work, much higher than the low adopters. There's a very meaningful effect in this perception, but I mean, I think like there's, this is folks who are close to the work, and so I think they have a sense of getting more capacity, and I think that's a very positive. This is, I think, driving, I think, a good. Again, it becomes viral if you can get more done, then that improves sentiment and adoption.
Right. I think people are concerned like how do I govern this, right? Like when I'm investing in AI, like as an enterprise, as a large company, like I need that accountability. So like where are my costs? Like am I wasting tokens? Like what's the tools?
Yeah,
Like do I have too many tools? Like how do I kind of standardize? Is there a risk to quality by improving this? Like where are the guardrails? What are the context limits, right? And then like do I have the change management in place? I think that's typically the biggest concern.
yeah,
And you don't solve that by simply making more tools or more seats available to people, right? You have to build in a process to kind of do that transformation. And that's the change management plan. That's not an AI plan.
yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. And speaking of, I mean, these are some of we've highlighted some of the positive findings. There's still, I mean, we ask, but I mean, I think there's still some very real, challenges that aren't completely solved yet. I think, unsurprisingly, with all the token maxing, et cetera, and drive to adoption, there is a view that cost is becoming a concern. It's like
Mhm.
especially everything that's happened, right? Like with the drop of, like, say, an Opus 4.7, literally like 20 to 30% more tokens for the same effort level, same task. It's like that, and pricing models have been in flux over the last year. Like it felt at moments, even in the last quarter, I felt like, wow, like I'm running out of tokens sooner, and the cost feels like it's going up. So that's unsurprisingly on people's minds. I think still too, this reluctance in there's still holdover of, is this really effective? I think it's 100% what you said about it has to be a net win, not just making you faster for coding. It can't then create other knock-on work. It's awesome if it makes coding faster. If it then creates a thousand review tasks of stupid stuff, I hate it, right? Like, and there's still that kind of reluctance is this a net win or is this just shifting work around? And then I think very much so we see like there was concern over the last year in proliferation of tools. It's a very churny space, people getting a bit of fatigue, and that's I think we've seen that's a knock on to that. Orgs trying to be a little bit more buttoned up in terms of what their selected tools are, less frequent change, more measured experimentation versus broad-based experimentation. So definitely some stuff. I think this is all stuff. My feeling is these issues are going to improve a lot over the next year. It's just moving so quickly, but there's still I think there's still stuff to be solved in this space.
Absolutely. But at the same time, I mean, you also want the best tools at any given
Yeah.
time for your organization. And that's also partly some of the motivation for the churn that you see, because each time a new model comes out or a new kind of feature comes out in one of these coding assistant tools, there is a tendency for engineers to say, hey, that's a new shiny cool thing. Like I want to go try it. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
uh, the benefit of a system like Blitzy is where, like I said before, like we insulate people from this, right? Like we
Yeah.
use the best models and the latest models. So like the moment a new model is released, it's available through Blitzy. But
Yeah.
you as a developer don't have to invest your time or your effort or your engineering organization's effort to kind of learn that new set of skills. You simply have to continue what you were doing before. We take on the burden of adjusting
Yeah.
the work that we have to do with the
In a
LLMs.
way, you've productized the solution to this third problem of proliferation, right? Like you're like, I'm gonna
Exactly. No, no,
put it in the
completely.
box and manage it for you. That's
Yes.
actually quite a
Right.
nice.
And the thing is, I mean, the resistance to adoption drops dramatically when you can demonstrate that AI can reliably produce work that is production ready, that's reviewable, and
Yes,
that's auditable. And
100%.
if we do that, and when we do that, that's the reaction we get from people, from our customers, is like, yes, this stuff works. We are buying into it.
Yeah. So that's some of the findings we had on the AI space. And this zooms out now, just a couple of, I think, really interesting findings, just generally, engineering as a discipline, as an industry. The first one, I think, very interesting, and I think it's not we didn't explicitly ask in relation to AI, but there's an AI tie-in here, which is 87%. This is much higher than past years. It's been growing. Say engineering directly drives business growth. That was, I think, historically a challenge of engineering organizations feeling insular. I kind of believe, this is conjecture a little bit, but I kind of believe that with the radical transformation of the industry to both adopt AI in the practice, but also, let's face it, we're integrating it into our products, into the software offerings. And if we don't, we're probably in trouble, right? Because we're going to be like a dinosaur, like this the way that apps are consumed, the way that like their surface looks. I mean, this is all becoming more AI native, and AI is bringing powerful ways that I think application capabilities can be consumed. Let's face it, you're not going to navigate that without an engineering function that's top notch, that's really like tracking the space quickly. So, I think in a real way, this is not just a perceptual thing. I think in a real way, with the transformation to this new technology landscape, engineering organizations are very strategic. So when I saw this result, I had to step back. I was like, that's cool. But I also think it's actually fairly justified in terms of what's happening in the industry. I don't know if you work with like leading software teams. Do you feel that in terms of how they're executing?
Definitely. So, I mean, oftentimes, like people refer to like R&D overall as a cost center, right? That's not a revenue center,
Yes,
even
yes,
though it
exactly.
is like very closely tied to growth and revenue.
Yes,
So, I think while engineering has that very key role in terms of creating that growth and creating that revenue, it also has to be accountable to kind of keep to budgets and to provide essentially an ROI with measurable outcomes, right? Like,
yeah,
do we have the velocity? Like, what's the cycle time? What's
yeah,
the amount of defects that we are leaving or creating, right? So overall, like, what's the business impact, right?
yeah,
And if the AI native systems and platforms and tools can provide those measurable quantities as part of the service that they're providing to the engineering teams, I think that goes a long way in terms of building that credibility and building that trust with the C-suite that, yes, this is worth investing in, and this is where you are actually seeing a lot of value.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we have those measures built uh, in our platform, for example, where like every every project that goes through has those metrics associated with it. And so the customer executives can see that
Yeah.
in real time happening. Like this is the value that we are generating for them. This is the ROI that's being returned to them.
Yeah. In a way, you're responding, but also capitalizing on that thirst for like engineering to drive the business. It makes a ton of
Absolutely. And
great.
it's a real need, right? I mean, it's always been true. It's just that like with AI's help, it's really easy
Yes.
to
Mhm.
actually kind of demonstrate that now in a
Yes.
tangible fashion.
Yes. I think it's closely related, maybe another side of the same coin, but this to me was maybe the biggest surprise in the whole report. I mean, if you look at the software industry right now, there's just a ton of uncertainty. It's awesome. All the AI stuff it's wild. It's incredible to be living through this transformation and seeing everything that's possible. At the same time, it's a really interesting transitional time, I think, in software industry. A lot of the traditional software companies, valuations are down. There's a lot of concern over like the employment outlook. There's a lot of that stuff, but in our survey, if you look at this as a general, this asked about some of the, outlook for your business. Is productivity going to be better? Is, your budget going to be grow on the basis of business growth? Is engineering a strategic concern for your business? So take this as a sort of a general sentiment meter on the industry. I was pretty surprised. I was like, wow, it's very, very positive. I think that is, despite all the uncertainty, it's what we said on the last slide. It's like that the AI transformation is making it a lot more, imperative for engineering organizations to be strategic and to transform the businesses that they're within. And so, I think it's a great time actually to be in engineering, despite all the transformation and the turbulence. It's a transformational time. So, pretty interesting result. I don't know if how that reads to you.
No, I fully agree. I think, I mean, people have reported these productivity increases, the budget improvements, and I think this is essentially the way that we have demonstrated the partly the maturation of the AI tools, but also in terms of the value that they bring, uh, the measurability that they bring, and all of this is possible by providing essentially that context to how the AI tools are accelerating engineering as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So that's the content we were going to cover. I do want to open it up for Q&A at the end. Just before we jump into Q&A, I'll say there'll be a link, a QR code you can scan to get the report. This is the tip of the iceberg of some of the results that we saw here. Not just interesting angles and questions that we looked at, but also the report has some key quotes. In some of the responses we asked for, written, textual responses. Some of the specific comments and stuff that we could share, I think, are incredibly interesting. I definitely recommend checking that out. It's a great snapshot of the pulse in the engineering industry. So with there, I'm gonna pause and I will pull up the chat. If you've got questions, please just drop them in the chat, and I'll pull it up right now. And we will try to field any questions. I'll read them out. Let's see what I've got so far. Okay, first one, Niraj, I'll read it out. It says, would both of you agree that communication becomes an essential skill because at the end of the day, this is now a deeper relationship with a machine, and those that can master communication with their prompting and understanding will be the ones that thrive even more. I think, Niraj, I'm gonna let you start on that one because I think that's to the like bullseye of the nature of the Blitzy product.
Right, absolutely. So the answer is both yes and no. Like I've been an engineer for like close to 30 years, and I have always felt that communication was always an essential skill, right? I don't think that's new in the age of AI, but it certainly matters a little bit more because AI is unforgiving in terms of poor communication, whereas another human might be able to kind of understand you a little bit better, even though you were not a great communicator. So what we see with Blitzy, for instance, is like the instructions that we give Blitzy are taken literally. which means that if the prompt is ambiguous, if there is any kind of contradiction within the prompt, then the plan that the Blitzy agents will come up with for execution is not going to be as great. And so when you review that prompt, you're going to see that there are still gaps, right?
Yeah.
So the way you want to address that is like being absolutely clear in terms of what your requirements are, what your success criteria are, and this is like basic engineering, right? Like if you are in a kind of a stand-up meeting with your cohort and you want to describe what your plan is, what your design is for implementing a new feature, you have to be able to communicate that effectively, and this is no different.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. I know every time when I'm working, on a personal project or whatever in an AI tool like a Cloud Code or a Cursor, every time it goes to a place that I'm unhappy with, and this is I think actually pretty much more true now with the newer models that were like since the end of the year. But I always find that it was like it's probably my fault. Like I wasn't clear about something that it needed to know to make the right choice.
Exactly.
I always
Right.
do my forehead slap, and I'm like, why wasn't I clear in my communication? All right. So marketing folks have passed me some additional questions. First one, the report shows AI adopters are pulling away. What does that look like operationally inside engineering teams? It definitely is impactful. I mean, I'll say it's everything from org structure. I think we're seeing like a real push towards like small, sort of context-rich teams. You can get a lot done with a small team, and a small team lowers communication and coordination, right? Like so, you essentially the AI becomes the capacity on the team. So smaller teams we're seeing like people management scope like a people manager can without a lot of the same if you're running small squads and teams a people manager can take a bigger scope. We're also seeing a lot of the people managers or management they're getting more involved in the day-to-day building. The tools are letting more roles including product designers build prototypes build features. It's kind of incredible. And then also process. I think we're starting to see a lot more. I don't know that it's settled yet, the SDLC, but there's an openness to change. People looking at their ticketing workflow, their PR workflow, asking like, how can that, especially as they perceive it to become a bottleneck, how can that change? So I think everything from obviously the technology using and harnessing AI more to the people, the org structure, to process, updating your SDLC, they're all getting impacted. So it's a pretty
Yeah, one of the things that we've noticed with some of our customers is that as we have shrunk the implementation time for software engineering, the design has now become a bottleneck. So we see a lot of demand for like additional design work. We see a lot of demand for like additional product work because people are saying like, well, we've run through the backlog. Like, what's next? And
yeah.
so
That's a
that
good problem to have. I ran
yeah,
into that.
exactly. And that's really exciting because I think before, like you would have like a team of engineers spend like 8 months, 10 months getting a new feature out, and now they can do that in 2 months using something like Blitzy, which just means that they can like put out 5 times as many features in that same amount of time with the same amount of expense. But it doesn't stop there, right? Because now the only kind of bottleneck you have is compute, and that's not really a bottleneck. So you just like you are doing these like 5 features in sequence, you could also do 5 features in parallel with the same engineering team.
Yeah,
And now instead of having one feature being managed by this team over 10 months, you just finished 25.
yeah,
And
100%.
that's an exponential growth.
Yeah,
So how do you deal with that, right? In terms of like supporting it through product, supporting it through design, like those are the challenges that I think engineering teams are going to start seeing now.
100%. Um, let's see. Next one that was passed directly to me. There's commentary from the respondents in the report about quality drift. Are teams shipping faster than they can safely maintain? I think that's a almost the critical question. This goes back to Niraj, your point about like it's awesome if it saves work, but not if it then makes equal or greater work, right? Like if I'm knocking down 10x more tasks, but then like half of them need redo, like what's the math
Right, right.
actually
So
look like?
this is actually where Blitzy really differentiates itself because like what Blitzy does is like everything is spec driven, test driven, and business driven. So right from the get-go, like right from the planning stage, the success criteria are built into the plan, which means that as the code is being generated, there is ongoing testing and validation that's happening. And it's not just unit tests or regression tests, right? We can plug into like the entire CI/CD pipeline. We can do integration tests. We can even do end-to-end tests as part of that ongoing development. And if there are any issues found, revert back to the code generation, address those, and kind of go through that cycle. So Blitz is not an interactive tool. It's not something that you're going to get results back within a minute or like 5 minutes of providing a prompt like you would get with a Copilot tool. It's a system to AI, which means it's going to go spend a lot of time planning, a lot of time like evaluating and validating and things like that. So our code generations can take like days or weeks, depending on the complexity of the project. But the overall velocity is immense, right? Because you just compress like several weeks or months of development into a matter of days.
Yeah.
So that's the difference in mindset there. But because it is all like spec driven, and we have agents who actually make sure that all of the implementation that's happening is happening according to the plan that was provided by Blitzy and then approved by the human engineer, we make sure that there is no drift.
Yeah. But this is, I'll also say just more generally, people using, AI development tools in the wild. This is a first class concern. And it's not trivial either. This is not just like, oh no, no, don't worry. It's a yes worry. And I think it's where like, my feeling is that the output of the LLMs got better over the last year, but not so much so that they're just trusted, without question by engineers. There's kind of like a measured trust. You're like, it's probably did. The real thing is you have to have compensating, elements in your workflow. Like
Absolutely.
TDD, it's interesting how TDD has become almost sort of de facto now. It's like that we heard about that a long time ago. It, was not clear how it, universally adopted. Now it's very universally adopted in AI workflows for exactly this reason. It's like if I want the thing to cycle until it's got something that is at least functionally correct, as long as I can be very articulate about my acceptance criteria, you see a lot of people using like Gherkin style specs and things like that to characterize precisely what they want. So all to say, like, there's no easy answer to this. And I think the key thing is like, so you got to put intentional effort and accommodation into your workflow. But then also, like, to what Niraj is saying, that then comes back to like, you have to have measurement because if I got, I made the code free, but it takes me 2x to make the LLM pipeline, get quality, it's not a win. We got to find ways to kind of right size that. So it's a critical question. I think, by the way, on net, when we look at the top level results, many orgs are mastering that. They're getting solid output, they're getting solid quality. They're seeing like we're seeing in our system stats, like as a SaaS that like looks at a lot of SDLC data, reasonable, holding a line in terms of, bug incidents and rework rate and things that indicate quality. So I think it's the kind of thing that's not a trivial challenge, but there's good progress in addressing it.
You just have to build it into your process.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if it's part of your software development process, right from the onset, then it's a lot easier to manage. And basically, both you can detect any potential drift and address it immediately before it becomes a big problem.
Next question was token costs are emerging as a major concern. How should organizations think about AI cost management? I think that this is an interesting question. I think it's a bit dynamic right now. What I'm seeing is it's very much on many organizations' radar. You're seeing a very common tactic is to try to set a reasonable, budget per developer. But yeah, pricing plans have been changing. It's been a little bit dynamic. And I'd say like where most orgs are right now is starting to establish some guidelines around what per engineer spend should look like. but they're more still in the mode of pushing adoption. So I think this is one of these topics that is emerging, but it isn't fully reduced to best practices yet.
So we have a slightly different take on this because we believe that token waste usually happens from context-poor work or repeated rework. So people kind of keep iterating over like the same task again and again, and because they haven't provided enough context to the LLM, or in some cases, or rather in most cases, the LLMs are simply not capable of maintaining the amount of context that is necessary to correctly solve the given problem. So with Blitzy, because we have this kind of uh, system level, repo level knowledge, which provides essentially what we like to call infinite code context for all practical intents and purposes, we have taken out the token cost as a concern for the customer. So we don't bill our customers by tokens. We bill them by the lines of code that we generate for them. And any kind of token management that needs to be done, we take care of that internally. The customer doesn't have to deal with that at all. So they have a fixed cost that they're paying per line of code, and that's decided upfront, and that's all they care about.
Yeah, it's a nice model. All right, a couple more questions here. With the amount of code produced by the AI tools, how are teams managing PR reviews? We have tools like BugBot, CodeRabbit, et cetera, but still needs a lot of attention by humans. How are teams solving this problem? I think one thing that I see happening is certainly some intentional segmentation of work. There, some amount of labeling changes that are allowable to go through with machine review. And again, this comes back to like you got to make sure there's good quality practices as long as like there's like a solid test discipline in the process. But like, yeah, I think this is a challenge that the whole industry is going to have to figure out is like we want humans to be accountable and therefore involved, but we also want to eliminate as much bottlenecks as possible. And the only way to do that is to allow more automation. It's about, I think, finding the right balance of tasks of what types of tasks are appropriate for, let it flow through without human eyes, and which types of tasks, be it critical code or something that's an extra challenging, like label these up front and say this is an extra challenging change, it needs human eyes for review. But balancing that, I think that's how you're going to be able to maximize throughput. I don't know if you guys have tactics, Neeraj, for that.
We absolutely have to, because like the traditional code review model is like a developer writes code and the reviewer is now looking at the diff manually, right? A Blitzy PR would typically be like several thousand lines of code. So that model just doesn't hold there. So we've effectively inverted that process by producing the reviewable artifact before executing the code generation. So we
Mm,
have what we call an agent action plan, which is essentially a very detailed roadmap of how Blitz is going to implement the solution before we write even a single line of code. And that's the document that the engineer would review saying, this is exactly aligned with what I want to do. And when you have that as the source of truth, then you can review the generated code using that as the reference. So now you're looking at like architecturally, is it aligned with the plan? API endpoints wise, like are those functional the way they are meant to be, right? And so those are the kind of things that you can focus on. And then you can decide to spot check code where you are particularly concerned about like the level of detail that may not be apparent simply by like these means or your AI automated tools for doing code reviews. But other than that, I mean, if you're going to kind of redo the model for software generation, you have to redo the model for that code review as well at the same time.
yeah,
So it's a mindset shift for both.
yeah, yeah. And this is why the SDLC is transforming to
Absolutely.
accommodate
Yes.
that variety. Absolutely. All right, one additional question here. Many consider measuring productivity gains and business impact through use of AI as a core challenge, but you did not list this among the main challenges. Do you consider this covered or solved already? And if so, how? So absolutely not solved. I think what you're seeing there is a bit of an artifact of just the presentation. We called out the measurement as its own slide to cover that challenge, and then the other one that was like, oh, here's the challenges. that was from a specific survey question that had a set of responses plus write-ins. So, but no, you shouldn't read into that that's not a significant and important challenge, and nor is it solved. I think there's great progress. There have been some nice frameworks. It's interesting. There were a number of frameworks. We proposed a framework. There's been a number of others. GitHub, they proposed a framework. It kind of breaks down the measurement into buckets of adoption. You got to look at things like, active usage, token consumption. That's adoption. If you're not adopting, you can't get anything. Then productivity gains, so productivity impacts in your engineering flow. It's PR cycle time, ticket volume, quality measures. And then business impact, that's where it gets interesting, where there's some standards. You can look at some of the stuff we talked about, such as, amount of capacity to roadmap. There's stuff that might be a little bit bespoke to your business. I think you often want to look at adoption. Like, did we drive more usage of product? Like, if I look in my Pendo, what do my daily active users look like? So I think it gets interesting. I think it's a lot of it builds on traditional consideration of engineering productivity, but there's this new trying to track or attribute the gains to the AI because we're spending on AI, right? So that's a new challenge that builds on traditional metrics. I think it's still a work in progress to come up with simple yet considered complete ways to measure that. So progress, but I don't think we're fully done yet. It's still an important challenge. And by the way, just to say the obvious, with that 85% versus 45% that are actually measuring, there's still an adoption challenge with measurement. We got to get more of the industry measuring this stuff. Niraj, any last thoughts on that one?
Right. Not too many, but yeah, I mean, it's basically like the leaders want evidence of like what was planned, what was built, what was validated, and what was delivered, right? And as long as you can provide that in terms of concrete, observable, measurable terms, uh, like cycle times, PR throughput, review latency, like trends for like bugs and defects and vulnerabilities, roadmap share. Like those are the kind of issues that people need measurements for. And that is what governs your token spend, your budget discussions, and your business outcomes.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we are at the top of the hour. We made it through the questions. Thanks for all the great questions. It's just awesome to get engagement on these. I think Niraj and I could talk to each other all day, but it's nice to know that there's some interest out there. Niraj, I can't thank you enough for joining us today.
It
It's
was my
awesome.
pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. This was a blast.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for joining us today. This was fun to do, and I'm glad you could be with us. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.